Under the blazing sun of Lagos, the city roared with life. The scent of roasted corn mingled with the perfume of diesel, and the cries of bus conductors cut through the music pouring from roadside speakers. Glass towers stretched toward the sky like proud giants, their reflections shimmering over the crowded markets below. Hawkers balanced trays of oranges on their heads, children chased after taxis, and men in suits hurried across cracked pavements, chasing dreams that sometimes ran faster than them. This was a city that never slept, where laughter and struggle shared the same rhythm, where poverty and wealth lived only one street apart. It was a place that could make or break anyone, depending on which side of ambition they stood. And in this city of endless motion, a quiet taxi stopped by a tall cream-colored building. Amara stepped out slowly. Her shoes were simple, her dress plain, yet there was something unshakable in her calmness. The driver thanked her, calling her madam, though she didn't look like one. She smiled faintly, handed him a note, and walked away. Her eyes carried the kind of silence that made people turn twice, not out of curiosity, but respect. She was a woman who moved without noise but left ripples behind. Beneath that modest fabric beat the heart of a woman the world didn't truly know, the daughter of a man whose name once ruled headlines, now whispered only in corners of power. To strangers, she was an ordinary woman returning home from abroad. But to fate, she was a storm in waiting. Her late father, Chief Kalu, had always told her, "Power doesn't shout, my daughter. It speaks through patience." Those words followed her like a shadow. In quiet moments, she still saw his wrinkled hands pointing toward the horizon as he said, "The loudest river is never the deepest." Chief Kalu had been one of the richest men in West Africa, a man who hid his empire behind silence. When he died, he left Amara not just wealth, but wisdom. She now sat on boards of companies that moved global markets, though no one knew her face. In a world obsessed with display, she chose peace over noise, truth over appearance. Love found her, unexpectedly, through Chika, a young man whose smile could charm even the hardest heart. He worked as a financial analyst in a struggling firm, his dreams far bigger than his bank account. He loved Amara's humility, her grace, her kindness. To him, she was peace in a world that never rested. When he proposed, she said yes with a heart full of hope, believing that love could conquer class, status, and pride. Their wedding was small, but beautiful. Friends whispered that Chiki had married down, not knowing that the woman he called my poor Amara could buy every diamond on that street without blinking. She didn't correct them. She only smiled. For her, love wasn't about proving worth. It was about finding peace in another's arms. But peace, like every good thing in life, soon met its test. Because where there is love, pride often waits nearby. Madame Nena arrived at her son's home like a storm wrapped in lace. Her perfume entered before she did, strong, heavy, and uninvited. A widow for nearly 10 years, she had learned to wear pride as her armor. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned Amara from head to toe when they first met, taking note of the simple dress, the unpainted nails, the calm smile. "Welcome." "Mama," Amara said softly, bowing slightly. Nana smiled, a smile too polished to be kind. "My son told me you were humble. I see now he didn't exaggerate." Cheek laughed nervously, but Amara simply nodded, her humility disarming. Nana's eyes lingered on her bag, an old leather tote, and her mouth twitched. "Next time, my dear, dress like a wife of my son, not like the maid. People in this city talk, you know." Amara's silence unsettled her. There was no anger, no reaction, only quiet grace, and that somehow irritated Nana even more. In her mind, she promised herself, this poor girl will learn her place. Outside, the city continued to hum, bright, bold, and blind to the quiet battle that had just begun behind the polished walls of a modern African home. The drums of pride had started beating softly in the distance, warning of storms yet to come, and as the night swallowed the city's noise, Amara stood by the window, her reflection framed against the skyline. Somewhere deep inside, she whispered to herself, Let them see what they wish. The truth doesn't beg to be noticed. The smell of pepper soup drifted through the small kitchen, thick with the sound of boiling pots and the hum of a distant generator. Amara moved quietly, her hands graceful and sure, slicing vegetables with care. Each movement was measured, almost meditative, the way her late mother had taught her. When you cook, cook with peace in your heart, or the food will turn bitter. But peace had become a rare visitor in that house. From the doorway, Madame Nena stood, her wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her eyes sharp and searching for fault. She said finally, lifting her nose. So this is what my son eats now? Water soup? Amara turned, smiling softly. It's light soup, Mama. Cheek said he wanted something gentle on the stomach. Gentle? Nena scoffed, crossing her arms. Or tasteless. In my days, a wife's food told you who trained her. But I suppose the village bride wouldn't know city seasoning. Her words hung in the air, sharp as a knife. Amara stayed silent, stirring the pot, refusing to let the insult settle in her spirit. Nena's eyes glinted. You remind me of Cheeky's ex. Now that was a woman. Polished, educated. She knew her worth. You hide behind silence. Tell me, what are you hiding, eh? Amara only smiled, her calmness irritating Nena more than anger ever could. When Cheeky entered, wiping sweat from his brow, his mother turned sweet. My son, come and see your wife. She has turned your kitchen into a place of fasting. Cheek chuckled lightly, but Amara saw the shadow in his eyes. The laughter didn't reach his heart. The kitchen, once a place of warmth, had become a silent battlefield, one where pride cooked its own poison. Each insult Nena threw was wrapped in sugar, but the bitterness lingered. And Amara's silence, her steady calm, was taken as defiance. The war had begun, not with shouts or blows, but with spoons and stares, in the very heart of the home. Ngozi arrived a week later, her presence filling the house like smoke. Young, flashy, and proud, she eyed Amara with open disdain. Mama told me you make soup that could heal the sick, she said mockingly. Let me taste the miracle. She dipped a spoon into the pot, smacked her lips dramatically, and laughed. Even salt is missing. My brother's love has made him blind, Nena chuckled from the sitting room. Don't blame him, my daughter. Love makes men eat even ashes with gratitude. From that day, the two women became one voice, whispering, laughing, judging. They gossiped with neighbors, sowing seeds of mockery. Have you seen Cheeky's wife? Ngozi told the tailor down the street. She trapped him with pity. The poor girl doesn't even own a decent pair of shoes. The neighbors laughed, and the gossip spread faster than wind through dry grass. The house became colder, the air heavier. Cheeky, caught between love and loyalty, grew quieter too. And Amara? She carried her pain like an unseen crown. Yet through every insult, Amara's calm remained unbroken. She woke early, swept the compound, cooked and prayed under her breath. When Nena's words turned to daggers, she only smiled and said, Peace be with you, Mama. Some called it weakness. But if you looked closely into her eyes, there was something deep, a stillness, ancient and knowing. The kind of patience born not from fear, but from strength. In Africa, the elders say, the river that flows in silence carries the deepest water. Amara was that river. Her silence spoke louder than any defense could. It was her shield, her wisdom, her quiet defiance against a world that mistook humility for surrender. Outside, the city began to whisper. That woman. Cheek's wife, people said in hair salons and market stalls. She has nothing. She's surviving because of him. Rumors moved like wind, unseen yet everywhere. But fate, patient as the moon, only watched. Because in this city, stories had a way of turning. Those who mocked today could be the ones bowing tomorrow. The narrator's voice softened, echoing like an elder's tale told by the fire. When pride sits on the throne, wisdom sleeps in the corner. And when laughter mocks humility, the gods take note. For the clay pot that boasts before the fire soon learns who holds the heat. The story paused, not ended, but waiting. Because in the land where ancestors watch and destiny never forgets, pride had just taken its first step toward a fall. The morning sun slipped through the curtains, spreading gold across the living room like a quiet blessing. But in that house, blessings had no place. Madame Nena sat in the center of the room, her head tie towering like a crown, her eyes sharp and unyielding. The air itself seemed to bow to her authority. "Cheek!" she called, her tone calm but commanding. In this house, order must be respected. A home without discipline is a market without a gate. Chike looked up from his phone, hesitant. "Yes, Mama." Nena's gaze shifted to Amara, who stood by the dining table, hands folded. "Food should be served to elders first," she declared. "It's our tradition." But these days, new wives forget their place. They think love means equality. Her words hung heavy. Amara bowed slightly and served her first. The act was humble, but Nena saw it as submission, victory. Each day, she found new ways to tighten her grip on the house. She decided who spoke, who laughed, even what station the television played. To her, Amara's silence was weakness, a thing to exploit. She took joy in commanding her. "Sweep again," she'd say. "You missed a corner." Or, "Don't touch that money. I'll handle it." At night, Amara would sit alone by the window, the city lights flickering below. Pride sat on Nena's throne, and peace had fled the house. But somewhere deep inside Amara's calm eyes, a quiet fire began to glow. By noon the next week, gossip had taken root like wild weeds. Beneath the old mango tree outside the compound, the market women gathered, tongues sharp, laughter loud. "Ah, have you heard?" one said, leaning closer. "The new wife, she brought nothing of value. No fine car, no dowry that shook the ground." Another snorted. "And her mother-in-law? That one talks like a queen. She said her son married a poor girl with soft hands and no substance." Their laughter danced on the wind, carrying the poison into every ear. Even the gateman chuckled when Madame Nena passed by, his smirk hidden behind his hand. In the compound, Nena's words became scripture. "A woman who brings no wealth must earn her place with service," she'd say loudly, knowing Amara could hear. Some people mistake grace for laziness. The pride of one woman became the shame of another. And though Amara kept her silence, the whispers stung. The mango tree outside seemed to listen too, its leaves trembling, as if it pitied the quiet soul beneath that roof. In the midst of scorn, one heart stayed kind. Titi, the young housemaid. She was barely 20, her laughter soft like the sound of evening rain. When the house slept, she would find Amara in the kitchen, sitting beside the dying fire. "Mama says I shouldn't talk too much," Titi whispered once, handing Amara a cup of tea. "But you're too quiet, madam." "Quiet people carry storms in their hearts." Amara smiled faintly. "I've learned that storms end when they stop being feared." Titi nodded slowly, remembering the wisdom of her grandmother. "The moon does not fight the darkness," she said. "It only waits to shine." Those words stayed with Amara like a song. Each time Nena shouted or Ngozi mocked, she repeated them silently. She began to understand. Patience was not weakness. It was strength clothed in stillness. Chike's heart, however, was caught in the storm. Each night he lay beside Amara but felt a wall between them. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't let a woman control you," while his conscience whispered, "Defend her." At dinner, when Nena made sly remarks, Cheeky would lower his eyes. "Mama, please," he'd murmur. "Please what?" She'd snap. "Should I watch a stranger turn my son into a servant?" Amara said nothing, her silence stretching like a wound. When Cheeky reached for her hand one night, she pulled away gently. "Love that fears truth cannot grow," she said softly. He sighed, torn between peace and justice, between love and loyalty. And in that quiet war, his silence became the sharpest knife of all, cutting the woman who loved him without ever drawing blood. Weeks later, Madame Nena decided to host what she proudly called a gathering of dignified women. She polished her gold bangles, dusted her lace wrapper, and rehearsed her greetings before the mirror. Only women of class should be in such company, she told Ngozi. Not every wife belongs in a parlor. Some are made for kitchens, that's their kingdom. Ngozi smirked. Should I tell her to prepare the food, Mama? Of course, Nena replied. Let her be useful at least. She should know her level. When Amara heard, she nodded calmly. I will cook with joy, she said, her voice steady. That evening, the living room shimmered with perfume and laughter. Women in fine wrappers sipped wine as Nena bragged about her family's class. Yet, not one of them knew that the quiet woman in the kitchen owned more than all their fortunes combined, and, as Amara stirred the pot, her reflection in the spoon smiled faintly, not with bitterness, but with knowing. For she had learned something the others had not. When the proud dance, the ground watches, and it remembers every step. The city moved like a restless drum that evening, cars honking, traders shouting, and the smell of roasted corn rising through the dusty air. In the midst of that chaos walked Amara, calm and composed, her steps light yet certain. Her outfit was simple, a white blouse and a dark skirt, but her presence carried quiet authority. No one looking at her would imagine she was the unseen hand behind some of the city's biggest ventures. At the glass doors of a tall building, a young man in a suit hurried forward. Good afternoon, Madam Kalu, he said with a bow. Good afternoon, Tunda, she replied softly. Is the contract ready? Yes, ma'am. The investors are waiting upstairs. She nodded, her face unreadable. The elevator doors closed behind her, and in the brief silence, her reflection stared back. Not the wife mocked for her simplicity, but the daughter of late Chief Kalu, the man whose quiet empire once shaped nations. By nightfall, her signature had moved millions. Yet when she returned home, she walked through the gate carrying a small nylon bag, humble, quiet, unseen. For in her husband's house, her crown stayed hidden. No one knew the truth. No one, except fate. And fate, as the elders say, never forgets. It was a bright afternoon when pride decided to show its face again. Amara stepped out of a modest yellow taxi, clutching a folder filled with business reports. Her hair was tied neatly, her smile faint. But before she could reach the gate, she heard laughter, sharp, cold, and cruel. My eyes must be deceiving me. Madam Nena's voice rang out. A wife of my son, stepping out of a taxi like a common trader. Ha! So this is how you live when no one is watching? Amara paused, her hand still on the gate. My son married a beggar who plays with papers. Nena continued, her laughter cutting through the quiet street. Neighbors turned. Some laughed softly, others looked away in discomfort. Even the Kiki driver by the corner shook his head in pity. Amara said nothing. She simply walked past her mother-in-law, her folder still held firmly, like a shield of dignity. Her silence was calm, but her eyes carried storms. Later that night, as she placed the same folder on her desk, the words echoed in her mind. Beggar. A small smile crossed her lips. If only you knew what these papers carry, she whispered to herself, the night wind answering with a sigh. But cruelty does not walk alone. Ngozi, her husband's stepsister, soon joined the mockery. She moved like a shadow, jealous, bitter, hungry for attention. One afternoon, as Amara stepped out to buy food, Ngozi grabbed her phone from the couch. Let's see what our village wife is hiding, she sneered, scrolling through the screen. When she opened the WhatsApp group named Women of Hope, she burst out laughing. Mama, come and see this! Nena appeared fanning herself. What now? Look at this group. Women of Hope. Probably her fellow jobless wives gossiping about soap and cooking. They laughed, loud and heartless. But what they did not know was that each name in that group, Ada B., Ifeoma A., Grace K., belonged to a powerful woman. CEOs, investors, philanthropists, together, they were shaping the country's economy under different identities. Their laughter echoed through the house like thunder before rain. And the gods, they say, always hear when mockery crosses its limit. It happened 3 days later. The day pride finally struck its hand. Amara was sweeping the corridor when Madame Nena began shouting about respect. "You think because you can speak English, you are better than me?" She barked. "You forget who fed you, who made you part of this family." Amara stopped, her broom still. "Mama, I have never disrespected you," she said quietly. Silence again. Nena roared. "That silence of yours, it's arrogance." Ngozi stood by, smiling, enjoying the fire. "Mama, maybe she thinks her quietness makes her wise." Nena's eyes flared. "You call me foolish?" Amara shook her head. "I call you my mother." That was when the slap came, swift, loud, painful. The sound filled the air, and even the birds outside fell silent. Cheek, who stood by the door, froze. He wanted to speak, but his tongue betrayed him. Amara did not cry. She placed her hand on her cheek, looked at Nena, not with anger, but awakening. Something deep within her heart shifted. She turned and walked away, her steps firm, her silence heavier than thunder. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Amara sat by the window, the city glowing below like a field of stars. Her reflection stared back at her, calm but resolute. She whispered, "The river that is quiet may one day swallow a village." Her fingers reached for her notebook, the one filled with her company's plans, signatures, dreams. She turned to the last page and drew a single line under her name, Amara Kalu. Slowly, she removed her wedding ring and placed it on the table. "The time for silence has ended," she said softly. "Now I will speak, not with words, but with truth." Outside, thunder rolled over the horizon, as if the ancestors themselves were stirring. When dawn came, the house still slept. But Amara was already dressed, her bag in hand, her heart steady. She no longer walked as a wife seeking peace. She walked as the woman the city once whispered about. The woman fate had been waiting for. The city woke before the sun that morning. From the slums of Ajagunle to the marble streets of Lekki, something electric filled the air. The radio voices spoke in excitement, like griots announcing the birth of a legend. "A new sun rises over Lagos," one host declared, his tone thick with awe. "A mysterious billionaire is said to be investing in the people, not politicians, not tycoons, the people." Drummers near the bus park echoed the same rhythm of wonder, their beats bouncing between buildings. Traders paused mid-sail, whispering over steaming pots of beans and plantain. Taximen leaned out their windows asking, "Who is this one? Which family born am?" No one knew the name, but the air carried a sense that destiny had shifted. Banners waved along the highway, bright and bold, a new dawn for the youth. Children ran beside them, shouting the words like a chant, not knowing they were calling the name of the woman who once walked among them in silence. And somewhere across the city, beneath the shade of her quiet home, Amara tied her headscarf, her face calm, her eyes like sunrise. The wind seemed to bow before her, as if even fate remembered her name. The hall fell silent, so silent that even the chandeliers seemed to stop breathing. Madame Nena's laughter, once loud enough to shake walls, broke off midway like a drumstick snapping against dry skin. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. Cheeky's glass slipped from his trembling hand and shattered, the sound sharp like thunder on a dry night. Ngozi froze, her painted lips parting in disbelief as she gripped the edge of her chair. They all stared at Amara, not as the quiet woman who once served at the table of others, but as the light standing at the center of her own storm. The gold of her gown shimmered like the first sunrise after Harmattan, bold, pure, unashamed. The banner behind her glowed with her name, each letter burning itself into their memories. Whispers ran through the hall, swift as Harmattan wind. "She owns it. The Amara Kalu Foundation belongs to her." A murmur rose, surprise, admiration, a touch of guilt. Even those who had mocked her bowed their heads slightly, as though paying respect to a truth that had walked among them in disguise. And in that breathless silence, pride crumbled, for the beggar they mocked had built the very banquet they came to honor. The sun had barely lifted its face over the skyline when Madame Nena appeared. Before the glass doors of Amara's penthouse, her once vibrant wrapper was now plain and folded with trembling care. Her feet, bare and dusted from the morning road, carried the weight of her pride and her shame. In her hands, she held a small woven basket, the kind used by mothers to bring comfort, not gifts. Inside lay a bowl of soup, made with her own hands that had once pointed, mocked, and ruled. The guards at the entrance exchanged uncertain glances, whispering to one another. It wasn't every day that a woman of her status came walking humbly, head bowed, to the house of the same daughter-in-law she once called a disgrace. When the doors opened, Nena's eyes lifted. She stood still for a moment, gazing up at the tall building as if it were a mountain she must climb to find forgiveness. "I came with nothing," she murmured, her voice low and cracked with years of unspoken regret. "Only the food my hands could still prepare." The morning breeze seemed to pause. Even the city's restless noise softened, as though the world itself wanted to witness what humility looked like when it finally knelt. An old saying stirred in the wind, one her mother used to whisper long ago. "Even the tallest tree must bow when the wind of truth blows." And so, Madame Nena bowed, not before wealth, but before grace. The days that followed were gentle, like the first drops of rain after a long drought. The air in the house, once heavy with pride, sharp words, and unspoken pain, began to soften. The laughter that had long vanished returned, quietly at first, then freely, like birds coming home after a storm. Amara moved through the home not as a conqueror, but as a healer. Her calm presence became the thread that wove new peace between broken hearts. She did not speak of revenge or the wounds of yesterday. Instead, she spoke of balance. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the city, she gathered them around the dining table, the same table where silence once ruled like a cruel queen. "We cannot build a house where pride sleeps beside love," Amara said gently, her eyes moving from Nena to Chica. "Love without respect is empty, and respect without humility is dangerous. Let us begin again, not as enemies, but as family." Madame Nena reached across the table, her old hands trembling as they met Amara's. "You are right, my daughter," she whispered. "The heart learns wisdom only after it tastes its own pride." And in that quiet moment, forgiveness became the food they all shared. The city woke that morning with drums, color, and song. Flags of gold and white waved in the breeze as people gathered for the grand opening of the Amara Kalu Foundation. The air smelled of roasted maize, palm oil, and new beginnings. Young dancers spun in circles, their bare feet striking the earth in celebration. Elders nodded with knowing smiles, whispering blessings to the woman whose grace had turned pain into purpose. Amara stood at the center of it all, radiant in a gown of gold trimmed with white lace. Beside her stood Madame Nena, dressed the same. The once proud matriarch now smiled with humility, her arm linked with Amara's in quiet pride. When a reporter stepped forward, microphone trembling in hand, he asked, "Madam, who is this woman standing beside you?" Nena's voice rose clear and strong. "She is my daughter, the woman who taught me what real wealth looks like." The crowd roared with applause. Children clapped, women ululated, men raised their hats to the sky. It was not only Amara's triumph, it was a victory for every soul ever silenced by mockery, for every woman whose worth was hidden beneath humility. The sound of joy rolled through the streets like thunder after long silence. As dusk brushed the city in gold, the camera drifted upward. The skyline shimmered, towers of glass reflecting the fire of the setting sun. Children waved small foundation flags from the courtyard below, their laughter echoing across the evening air. Women clasped their hands in gratitude, tears glistening as they watched Amara greet the youth who now had hope because she believed in them. Amara stood before the glass tower that bore her name, her reflection glowing in its mirrored face. Behind her, Cheek and his mother stood side by side, no longer chained by guilt or pride, but bound by forgiveness. She smiled softly, not at her wealth, but at the peace that had finally come home. The once broken family had become living proof that forgiveness rebuilds what money never could. And as the drums faded, the city exhaled, content, alive, reborn. A calm voice rose with the night wind, deep, rhythmic, like the voice of an elder by the fireside. "Never judge a person by what they wear or where they come from," the voice said. "Sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest fortunes, not in money, but in grace." The camera lingered one last time on Amara's face, serene, proud, at peace. Then it lifted to the skyline, where stars blinked like ancestral eyes watching over a city made whole again. And beneath the soft beat of distant drums, the story closed, not with pride, but with peace restored. Pride, but with peace restored.